Music is one of the most magical art forms because it's so ubiquitous. I feel like every single society, every civilization, even dating back to prehistoric times, somehow discovered music. A great musical number can transcend language, I don't need any English subtitles to know that the guy who sings the Death Note opening in Season 2 is going through some stuff.
Remember that night by the bonfire? Yeah.
It is one of the oldest and most universal forms of expression, which is why it's such an important component in seemingly every other medium, especially video games. The thing about video games is that they are actually multiple art forms working in tandem with each other: visuals, acting, writing, gameplay, and music. Even the very code that the game runs on is a work of art in itself in a lot of cases. There are definitely games that have weak links in one or more of these areas, but if one thing is invariably true, it's that I have never enjoyed a game that didn't have great music.
I'm going to take your head and ram it up my butt. My butt. That's right, my butt. My butt. My butt.
If you've been watching me for some time, you probably noticed that I never talk about a game without talking about the music because it is that important to the experience. Today I'm gonna talk about some video game music that I happen to enjoy for a great multitude of reasons. I have heard so much video game music in my time that I feel like this video was an inevitability. And also, Admiral recently uploaded his own video on game music, which got me thinking about my own thoughts on the matter. So you can thank him for that. First, let me take you back to when video game music was the only music I listened to. The exact timeline is a little fuzzy after years of faulty memory, but I'm gonna place this part of the story around like 2007, 2008. I was like 9 or 10 at the time, and of course video game music was pretty much the only music I knew. Why was I trying to play the pizza theme from stupid ass Earthworm Jim 3D on my Yamaha keyboard instead of trying to cover Clocks by Coldplay, which sounds suspiciously similar to that one song from Pokemon Gen 2? Well, because I played Earthworm Jim 3D way more often than I listened to the radio. We did have a CD player with radio functionality, but I wasn't allowed to touch it, and most of the CDs we had were Bing Crosby Christmas carols or Irish folk music. Imagine being a kid at school and the music teacher at your stupid mandatory music class asks everybody what their favorite musical artists are. Everyone else is saying Beyonce and Gwen Stefani and 50 Cent or whoever else they were saying back then. I don't remember. Maybe Justin Bieber, I don't know. And then it gets to you and you have to choose between the dude who made the music for Star Fox or Patty and the Three Leaf Fuckers. Also, this doesn't matter at all, but whenever I heard the song Viva La Vida at an event, I always said, why are they playing the Invincibility theme from Mario? That's right, if you speed up the instrumentals of that song, it sounds like the Starman theme. Nobody I knew ever seemed to bring this up. It wasn't until I looked it up years after the fact that I found out, yeah, a lot of people found that connection. So not only did Coldplay riff on Pokemon Gen 2, they also riffed on Mario, and you cannot convince me otherwise. The only reason I ever started listening to real music in the first place was actually because of a video game, and that game was Guitar Hero 3, which is where I learned that I really like the band Slipknot.
You want that one? Yeah, you do. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
At some point or another, I'm pretty sure I got a very crappy MP3 player that I could load up with iTunes songs that my brother bought. The usual millennial shit, Foo Fighters, Who Were Foo Fighting, System of a Down, Disturbed. There was definitely more than that, but even with real songs that I happened to hear at events or over the radio in my dad's car, there was no way I could just seek it out and find it again. Because we only had the one computer and I wasn't really allowed to just look stuff up because my parents were afraid I would get kidnapped or something. You guys think I had a phone back then? You're a funny little guy if you think that. It was obscenely awkward to actually care about the soundtrack for Mario. Everybody would make fun of you, and never could I have imagined growing up and finding that there existed a lot of people who actually appreciated video game music for what it was. It's just music, man. Dude. Even today, the music that I end up listening to is just whatever I happen to hear and enjoy depending on the situation. And because I spend a lot of time playing video games, a lot of that music, incidentally, is still video game soundtracks. On rare occasions, when I'm at a public event or buying groceries and a song that sounds nice shows up over the radio, I'll just use Shazam, because if you have to ask an actual human being what song is playing over the radio, it might look at you like you're some kind of alien from Jupiter for not already knowing. Are you telling me you don't know Get Up With a Get Down by Lil Bubby featuring M&M's and Reese's McPieces produced by Acorn spelled with a K? Brother, I play ROM hacks of Mario. I don't know anything about the real world, okay? Video game songs will never play over the radio or anything like that. And before YouTube became a legitimate option, your best bet is just to pray that they would release the soundtrack on a CD, which you definitely couldn't take for granted. And even if it did, you'd probably have to special order that shit. I think the internet played an immeasurably huge role in legitimizing video game music, because now you can actually listen to it outside of the context of the video game wherever you want. You can just go on Google and type MGS2 Arsenal Gear song, and in 3 seconds you find it on YouTube, and then get chills down your spine because that song is extremely unsettling, especially in the context of the game. In the beginning, video game music was heavily limited by the hardware that it was running on. Consoles couldn't play back pre-recorded music like they can now, or if they could, the game format simply couldn't hold it all, so it didn't matter. The best option was to digitally synthesize it in real time based on the programming of the game. The earlier video games, if they had sound capabilities at all, would generally prioritize sound effects over music.
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
But as they got more advanced, they didn't have to choose. They could have both. Donkey Kong, most of the music in that game is a loop that lasts less than 1 second. Listen. That is the entire song. That's it. You can never achieve a Beethoven level of prestige on an NES sound chip, but it's quite remarkable how well the developers were able to leverage it back then. One of the best examples is the Super Mario Bros. Theme. I mean, there are a ton of great songs on the NES, but that one is easily the most recognizable. If you listen closely, you can break down the individual sound channels all coming together like an electronic 4-piece band to create what is probably the most iconic tune in video games. This is a classic. Everybody loves this song because it's so catchy and well made. There is not one instrument doing all the heavy lifting. They're all equally important, and if you remove even one of them, it sounds weird. What's cool about this type of music is that some consoles had their own unique sound to them, which wasn't always a good thing, but in the case of Sega Genesis, it was an incredible thing. The Genesis has an extremely distinct sound to it that is instantaneously recognizable. But with Super Nintendo though, they got into audio samples. They were able to play back pre-recorded audio samples with pitch effects then applied onto them in real time, which allowed them to create music that started to sound a lot more like what you might call real music. Of course, they could also sample monkeys. The monkey music approach was so revolutionary that they actually reused it for Donkey Kong 64. The Super Nintendo library is home to some of the greatest video game soundtracks ever made, but even this started falling out of style because games started moving to CDs, which allowed them to store and play back pre-recorded music. So it was no longer sound chips trying to synthesize what real instruments might sound like. Even the Nintendo 64 was able to play back pre-recorded music, just as long as it didn't exceed the cartridge space, which typically required a decent compression algorithm. But that's science stuff. The real reason I bring up the N64 is because that was my first console, and that's where I heard a lot of my first video game music. Of course, just because a console can produce good music doesn't mean it always does. But when it does, it's like magic. I was watching Nakey Jakey's video on Starfield, and he offhandedly mentions that Skyrim has one of the best soundtracks in video games, and he lists a couple games with super good music. You know, mostly the usual Chrono Trigger, Minesweeper, and Kirby 64. At first I raised an eyebrow. I mean, I knew it was good, but I didn't realize it was that good, until I actually went back through the soundtrack again and said, okay, yeah. Kirby has always had great music, and 64 has one of the most consistently good scores of any video game I know. But this ain't just a game with good music. This is a game with incredible music, and there's really nothing else like it. And for a game that's famous for being overbearingly cheerful and happy, it's surprising how much variety is in the soundtrack. In the beginning, you know, Kirby's always running around with a big-ass smile on his face, grabbing cake and hitting enemies with a big energy sword, and the music just captures that beautifully. But then, in the immediate second level, it hits you with this beautiful, wistful, slow track that perfectly matches the atmosphere of walking around in a forest by yourself. This is the music that plays when you've just had a mental breakdown and you need some time away from everybody else to reflect on all the mistakes that you've made in your life. Like buying Saints Row. Then it's right back to happy times on the beach. This is one of those songs that's so happy that it's overpowering. The mystical temple music. This is the stuff that plays when you enter a 1,000-year-old cathedral in England. The water slide music. This will make you feel like a little kid. This is one of the few Kirby games to actually have its own unique invincibility theme, and I kinda like it better than the usual one. But by the end of Shiverstar, Kirby 64 180s into the scariest game on planet Earth with this factory level. This epic music makes it sound like Kirby is triumphing over some horrible, unstoppable force. But then you hear a chorus of haunting voices creep in. Playing this as a kid, my heart just dropped into my stomach when I got to this level. This is the only time in the game you will hear this song. And you know what's messed up? That's not even the scariest part. Literally 3 levels afterwards, it hits you with this. The final level of the Ripple Star has this haunting jazz beat that gets you pumped but also intimidates you and gets you paranoid about whatever's gonna be at the end of it all. I think the dissonance between the extremely cute art direction and character designs and all the scary music ends up making it more effective. Kirby 64's soundtrack is so good that it's actually one of the few games that included a sound viewer mode. Every game should have this. Let's talk about Tetrisphere, one of the weirder games in the Tetris canon. I used to play this all the time when I was a kid. Whether you actually like this game or not is a matter of opinion, but the soundtrack is so good it might be illegal. This is the type of music that makes you want to do terrible beatboxing with your mouth. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door is full of catchy and atmospheric tracks. I just recently replayed this game all the way through for the 98th time, and I am still very impressed by the variety of the music. I never get tired of the mini-boss theme. Listen to that. Rock Hawk's battle theme. Everybody wants a theme that sounds like this. X-Not Fortress goes like... What about leveling up? Well, in most RPGs it sounds like this. But in this game, it sounds like this. The music alone can tell a great story, like how the Shadow Siren's music goes from scheming and mischievous. But then it turns really sad out of sympathy for Vivian. Rogueport's theme is one of my favorites. It starts out sounding like an exciting high seas adventure. But then you hear this. This little part of the song feels like it's reminding you that, hey, this might look like fun, but bad shit happens here. One of my favorite moments in the game is the final chapter where you are just descending further and further into hell as this chilling, cursed reimagining of the classic underground theme just washes over you. Playing this for the first time as a little kid, it was like the speakers themselves were a conduit for the underworld. But then you hit this area with no music whatsoever, just the sound of flowing water. In the center is an ancient tower, and when you enter, it hits you with this. This is such a beautiful and mysterious song that completely flies out of left field. This song is telling you that on some level, as cursed as this place is, it is still profoundly sacred and holy to somebody. The remake already showed off bits and pieces of the remix soundtrack. I'm hoping they can hold on to the spirit of the original pieces, and if not, hopefully they'll do what Mario RPG did and let you choose the old tracks instead. The music seems to be the only thing that's consistently good between all the Paper Mario games. Even Sticker Star has some bangers, like when you're fighting the angry blooper bitch. Luigi's Mansion has a couple of songs, but primarily there is one song that plays for the entire game, and it's a song that Luigi is humming to himself because he's terrified of the dark. I love how the humming gets more erratic and off-key as he loses health. When you're walking through the hallways, you can hear the song being played on actual instruments as though there's a band of ghosts just following Luigi everywhere. When you're outside in the garden, the instruments change to a single harp-like instrument. But when the lights are on, Luigi stops humming the song and starts casually whistling it instead. With this little detail, Luigi is basically saying, "Alright, I'm safe now." It's cool how the same song can take on an entirely different attitude depending on the context and delivery, and how one single motif can be repurposed and reused in so many different ways. One of my favorite examples of this is Yoshi's Story for the N64. This is a game I'm somewhat split on, you know, I love it and I hate it. There are tons of things that make this game great, and there is also a lot of stupid shit. But I'll be expanding on that in the next episode of reviewing every Mario game. That's right, I didn't forget. Most of Yoshi's Story soundtrack is different variations of but those variations go off in so many different weirdo directions that there'll be some version of the song that you like more than the rest of them. But you already know what my favorite is. I always love when the musical attitude of the same song changes to suit the level. Banjo-Kazooie is a great example where the instruments will change as you go to different parts of the same map. Or if you go underwater, it removes all the percussion and swaps all the instruments to these light strings, again, like Luigi's Mansion. Then you got Pikmin, where the game actually adds percussion whenever you get into a fight. Pikmin music is incredibly atmospheric. Pikmin 2 especially. I'll never get over just how many slow and atmospheric tracks there are in that game. And they even change depending on which character you're playing as and how much health you have left. They utilized it in every way they could. Eventually, games would start bringing the heat with super dramatic cinematic scores, sometimes even bringing in composers that worked on movies, like how Call of Duty brought in Hans Zimmer or how Kojima brought in Harry Gregson Williams to start doing the music for Metal Gear. Harry Gregson Williams in a video game? But he worked on Shrek! All the Metal Gear games, even back to the MSX titles, have incredible music. Of course, Phantom Pain brings in a bunch of licensed music from the 80s to immerse you in the time period, and there will never be anything funnier than Take On Me playing in your helicopter while you're probably committing a war crime. Sins of the Father fills me with indescribable emotions. And you gotta talk about Snake Eater. Snake Eater. For a new era of Metal Gear, they did something completely different and made this James Bond style song about eating snakes in the jungle. That's when Major is all like, "Why don't you like James Bond, Snake?" And he's like, "Because it's not realistic. Real spies shoot people in the head with a gun that has infinite ammo because the barrel is shaped like an infinity symbol." Also, I gotta mention that the part in MGS4 where you return to Shadow Moses and it starts playing The Best Is Yet to Come, which is the credits theme for MGS1, that was such a profoundly emotional moment in the game, and every time I get to that part, I just vomit my bones out. Halo. Everybody knows that Halo theme, even if they haven't played the game. The soundtrack of Halo is magical enough that it could really be its own video, but the context of that cannot really be fully appreciated without knowing how most FPS games sounded previously. Before Halo, a lot of FPS games had these heavy metal soundtracks because that's what goes through your head when you shoot a dude's leg off. This dates as far back as the original Doom, whose soundtrack is composed of Metallica and Pantera and Slayer, even though none of them gave permission to use their music. The original Quake, the soundtrack, was literally composed by Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, which is why they added a nail gun as a weapon. Quake 2, I use that game's music in my videos all the time. I love that shit. GoldenEye really flew out of left field with music that was intended to sound more like sneaky James Bond music. One of my favorite songs is the one that plays in the control center, which is ironic because this is the most infuriating mission in the game. But then there's Halo, which went in such a literally otherworldly, ethereal direction with these ancient monk chants that make it sound like you're ascending to the heavens to meet God, and he's going to assign you a divine mission to shoot a bunch of nondescript aliens in the face. Everyone has their favorite Halo tracks, but to really get immersed, you want a score that will elevate the emotions of the current situation. And my favorite example is the shit that plays while you're facing down the stupid flood on this bridge 1,000 feet above the ground with the snow blowing in the wind in the dead of night. There is really nothing else like this. For all the great stuff that Halo accomplished, I really don't think it exists the way it does without the music. Cyberpunk 2077, in spite of its disastrous launch, there's a lot of stuff I love about this game. I first played this game a couple of months after launch, before it got all fixed up, and when it wasn't bugging out beyond reality, the atmosphere was honestly impeccable, and the music is a huge part of that. I love the music in this game. Whether it's the combat music, or the atmospheric stuff, it's all good. Dark Souls! Almost every one of these games has at least one very comforting song that makes you feel safe after breaking your balls to get through whatever hellscape the game wants you to traverse next. Last year, I played through all of these games, and they definitely have their share of roaring, triumphant battle music that makes it sound like the bosses are gonna break out of the television and punch you in the dick. But in the end, it was all the peaceful music that was permanently written into my mind. Whenever I'm pissed off, I put on the Majula theme from Dark Souls 2, and I just feel the waves washing over me and clearing out all the anger and rage like a spiritual pressure washer. Some video game villains have their own theme songs and motifs, which is another thing I loved about Thousand Year Door. I remember when they revealed Sephiroth for Smash, you heard his music before you even actually saw his face. And that was obscenely epic, especially for people who actually wanted him in the game and not Doom Guy. F-Zero X, for a game this fast, you want a soundtrack that goes even faster, and would you listen to that? Star Fox 64, that game is like... Super Mario Galaxy, that game is just full of incredibly triumphant symphonic music. Previous Marios are proof that you don't need a soaring symphony orchestra to create excellent music. But it's a good fit for Galaxy because it's a much bigger and literally more galactic adventure than anything before it. But it's not as good as Odyssey.
Jump up in the air, jump up, don't be scared. Jump up and your cares will soar away. And if
Alright, so I accidentally made this a half-hour long video, so I'm gonna close this off with Zelda the Ocarina of Tai Chi. This game, the music in this game will make you smile. It'll make you think. It'll make you cry. It'll make you shit your ass. And it'll make you want to ride a horse. Riding on the motherfucking horse. Riding on the motherfucking horse. Basically, this game has good music. There are a billion different game soundtracks that I could talk about, and if I had unlimited time on Earth, I could have made this video 7 hours long. So in the big picture, this is really just a sample of some of my favorite video game bangers, but now it's your turn. What are your favorite video game songs? And which game has the best soundtrack? And why is it Earthworm Jim 3D?